Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has arrived in Washington ahead of the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit set for the 13th to 15th of December. Presidential spokesperson Garba Shehu has been speaking on what Nigeria hopes to achieve at the summit. He met up with our State House correspondent Adesuwa Omoruan, who is in Washington, D.C.
President Muhammadu Buhari's plane taxis the runway of the Joint Base Andrews. At exactly 6:45 p.m. local time, the president disembarks to a waiting entourage, including ministers, ambassadors, and other top government officials. The president is in Washington to participate in a 3-day United States-African Leaders Summit. It's the second such summit, and the U.S. says it wants to show its commitment to Africa and increase cooperation on shared global priorities. But what does Nigeria hope to achieve at the summit?
This is a meeting that would possibly be talking about everything under the sun. Good governance, human rights, climate change, food security, civil society, just about everything under the sun. So let's be there, let's talk about it. A side event that is also important to us here is the meeting of the Corporate Council roundtable meeting. This is specific to Nigeria by the Corporate Council of Africa, CCA. In September, they were part sponsors of the business summit Nigerian government held in New York. This time around, it is CCA and Nigeria alone.
The 3-day summit will see President Buhari participate actively. It will have the opportunity to address participants.
President is given a keynote speech on the matter of just energy transition. It's a very important matter for Nigeria. If you recall, in the course of COP25 in Scotland, actually the rich nations of the world had tried to limit funding, for gas projects all over the world. For us in Nigeria, gas is important as a transition energy, so that we move away from firewood, the generation of and promotion of desertification and all of that, so that we stop the aggravation of climate change in our own environment.
The summit is coming almost a decade after the inaugural one at the instance of the then President Barack Obama. Expectations are high, as observers say the Biden administration tries to redefine the U.S.-Africa relations and participate more strategically in an emerging continent where the likes of China and Russia have engaged with regularity. The United States did say it sent out this invitation to countries in good standing with the African Union. President Muhammadu Buhari, he is accompanied on this trip by two governors of Bauchi State and his Kwara State counterparts. Some ministers would also be accompanying the president and top government functionaries. It is a crucial summit. It's coming almost a decade after the first one at the instance of President Barack Obama. Interestingly, President Biden was then the vice president. He did have some engagement with some heads of state at that time, unfortunately, who are still in power, but not for President Muhammadu Buhari, who came to power just after that summit in 2014. We expected to see a lot of engagement. There's something for everybody here: the youth, the innovative mind on the continent, the diplomatic circle, the private sector. We should see some American CEOs and Nigerian CEOs sign a couple of engagements. There are those who say when it comes to financial aid, when it comes to foreign assistance, the United States remains the biggest player for sub-Saharan Africa. But on the other hand of trade, investment, infrastructure, the U.S. is trying to play the catch-up game with what is clearly an emerging continent, an emerging Africa, the continent for the future. From the Joint Base Andrews, NAF, Washington, Adesuwa, Omoruan, reporting for Arise News.
And Adesuwa Omoruan joins us now live from Washington, D.C. Good to have you, Adesuwa. Can you bring us up to speed about exactly what we would be expecting from this conference and exactly what President Buhari might have on his agenda?
Well, it's good to be here, Hawa and Temi Tokwe. I can tell you that although the weatherman has forecast that the first snow will fall on Washington, D.C. mid-December, that's any moment from now, I can tell you that the heat will be on during the summit with the U.S. President and his members of cabinet, of course, with leaders from the African continent. Yes, it's a crucial meeting, like I said in that report. It's basically a chance for President Biden to welcome and broadly engage the continent, even though it's on home turf. President Biden, as you know, is yet to visit Africa since he became president of the United States. But observers say the language in the build-up to the summit has been cordial, whether in statements released or documents ahead of the summit or members of the cabinet of President Biden speaking. You hear very cordial language. You hear the reference to Africa as partners. So we do know that African leaders who have traveled across the Atlantic to the United States yesterday, including President Muhammadu Buhari, are not coming here to genuflect. They're not coming to beg for aid, but they're coming as partners, as a bloc. And observers do hope that, it's an opportunity for them to persuade the administration to engage with the continent more strategically as a bloc and not as individual continents. Yes, it's a very busy couple of days for the African president. First, on the first day, which is tomorrow, it will begin with something for the youth, for the innovative mind, the entrepreneurs on the African continent. We talk about this burgeoning population of Africa and how it's very youthful and very fast. And I think that this summit in itself by the United States is an acknowledgement that Africa is the continent to reckon with the young people. So it kicks off with the forum for young Africans tomorrow. There will be 7 sessions tomorrow. Now, President Muhammadu Buhari will be participating actively, like his spokesperson Garba Shehu said in my report yesterday. President Buhari will be one of the few African leaders who will actually give a talk. He'll be talking about climate change, but particularly on the theme of just energy transition. What does this really say? We would look forward to that. But analysts have said, as the race to a net zero world, net zero economy has begun, we have to consider that transition. What does it do to the workers, to the communities affected? Yes, we want to limit our carbon footprint, but is it right to do so in Africa, just as we're seeing countries recalibrate, returning to coal and exploring oil and gas more? With the Russia-Ukraine crisis, a lot of countries are recalibrating how they get their energy. So as Africa transitions, what is just for Africa? We'll hear President Buhari speak on that. We'll also see him participate in the business forum, which is on the second day. The second day is dedicated entirely to the business community. We'll see CEOs from America and, of course, from Nigeria signed couple of agreements. That should be one fruitful one to look forward to. And of course, on the third day, on the second day, we should see a dinner with President Biden and the African heads of state. On the third day is actually dubbed the Leaders' Day. I must say, this is one of the most important days for the African continent. They will be talking about critical issues, including food crisis. They'll be talking about the AGOA, U.S. flagship program AGOA. That's the American Opportunity Agreement Act, which currently expires in 2025. That would be an opportunity for African leaders again to persuade the Biden administration to renew that act. And whatever really happens to AGOA is left to be determined by the Biden administration. Also, we do know that Africa has its own developmental plans. So it's not about what you want to do for Africa. It's asking Africa what it wants. And of course, we have the Africa 2063 agenda, the Africa we want. There's also the AfCFTA, the largest single market, 55 countries, at least 1.3 billion people, a combined GDP of some $13.4 trillion. That's a huge market. And the United States does seem genuinely interested in the African market. They want to see more US goods in Africa. How does all of this play out? We'll be seeing that discussion or those discussions on the third day. So President Muhammadu Buhari is very active in some of this sub-themes and sessions during the summit. There's also one gathering which has to do with peace talks, international peace. We're told that President Muhammadu Buhari will also participate in that, and that's very crucial. As again he has repeatedly said, as he leaves office the next couple of months, with the general elections coming up, he wants a legacy of transparent, credible elections for Nigeria. That's what he wants to bequeath. And what's a credible election? What's a transparent election without a peaceful society? So we'll get to hear from President Muhammadu Buhari also on peace talks. All of that and more will be happening at the summit between President Biden's administration and the African leaders. Hawa.
Well, Adesuwa, thank you so much for that very detailed reporting. We understand that President Muhammadu Buhari will also be meeting with the Nigerian community in the U.S. Can you preview that meeting for us?
Well, we do not, at this moment, we do not have the time slot for that meeting, but it is not uncommon for President Muhammadu Buhari to go on these trips out of Nigeria and to meet with the Nigerian community. It's something we see him do regularly. And so for the president to schedule to meet Nigerians in Washington is something that we'll look forward to. We'll bring you those reports as they unfold. That's why we're on ground. President Muhammadu Buhari has been to the United States a couple of times. As he winds down his administration, we'd like to hear what he tells Nigerians in the diaspora about what his administration has been able to do. And you do understand that a lot of talks with the elections have come from this administration. But one critical topic we do hear from the diaspora Nigerians is how they should participate in those elections. Perhaps again we would hear that conversation, how Nigerians abroad, Nigerians in Washington may want to participate in that election. We do also know that it would take legislation by the National Assembly to ensure that they do participate in the elections. But maybe, just maybe, it's a promise President Buhari may be making to them. That and many more may be on the agenda. But Temitope, again, I do not have the time slot or day for that gathering or that meeting with President Muhammadu Buhari and Nigerians. But as soon as I get it, I'll let you know.
Well, thank you, Adesuwa, for that. We will be waiting that information. Just before we let you go, we know you've been outside in the cold for a considerable amount of time. There was a discussion about a roundtable of the Corporate Council of Nigeria. If you have any more information about when they will be meeting and who might be in attendance.
Yeah, so the Corporate Council meeting with Nigeria is specifically with Nigerians. They've had a couple of engagements in the past. Presidential spokesperson Garba spoke about that when I caught up with him yesterday on their arrival to Washington. However, this summit comes at a time of global fragility, which is gravely affecting Africa. Nigeria being the largest country on the continent cannot be caught napping. We've seen whether the double whammy from the COVID-19 pandemic with economic and health shocks. Africa is reeling from that. Nigeria is not any different. Is it the Russia-Ukraine war? Africa is reeling from that. Again, Nigeria is not left behind. We've also seen a decline in trade and investment from America, especially under the AGOA flagship program. Again, Africa is reeling from that, and Nigeria cannot be left behind. So this is an opportunity to foster those trade agreement, those trade relationships, partnership, especially multilateral ones that benefit all parties involved. And again, that's why I said it's a time for African leaders, and Nigeria, being the giant of Africa, persuading the President Biden administration at this time to partner with the continent more strategically, not just photo ops, not symbolic, but something concrete, where we see a more participating America on the African continent. Like I said, partnership that benefits all parties. It will be great to see that as AGOA expires in 2025, as the AfCFTA enters its second phase of implementation, as Agenda 2063 development program for Africa, we count down to that as well. So all of this we expect to see. America, like I said, is interested in the African market. That much we have seen from President Biden's administration's statements and engagement so far, but they want it to be as a bloc, not with individual countries. The U.S. organizing this summit says it's bringing together, particularly on the second day for the business forum, it's bringing together American CEOs, African CEOs to come together, forge those agreements, and America being the convener of the summit, also providing the tool for financing. How do we finance those investments? How do we see more investment on the African soil? And of course, particularly Nigeria, which is the largest country on the continent.
Well, State House correspondent Adesuwa Omoruan, thank you so much for reporting live from Washington, D.C.